Yes.
Good. Let's
All
do
good.
it. So, also, Rimantas, if you don't mind, maybe you've already started recording.
Yeah, I've already enabled that.
Perfect. Good. So, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this event. It's already our remote event from Agile Lithuania. So, we're really happy to gather such a huge crowd. And also we'll continue doing these kinds of events in the future. We see it as a great opportunity to not just allow people from different cities and even countries to join, but also invite speakers from all over the world. So hopefully this becomes a very nice tradition. So a little bit about the theme of these meetups this year. So we're kind of going back to basics, but not really. We talk about agile principles, but we talk about them from a practical perspective. So how people have been applying these principles in their working environment, what kind of lessons they learned. And this specific meetup is focused on principle number 11, which talks about self-organization and what can be achieved by self-organizing teams. Yeah, so let me briefly introduce you to the speakers who will then talk about themselves more. So today we have Ornella, Rimantas, and Krista joining us. So thank you very much for joining. I will not talk more about you. You will have an opportunity to introduce yourselves. So I'm just going to move to the next point, which is a little bit information about today. So the agenda is that we'll have 3 presentations from all of our speakers, and after that we'll have a sort of a panel Q&A. So you'll have an opportunity to ask questions throughout the event, and we will address them after the presentations. A little bit of technical information. So you're using Zoom. At the bottom of the screen, you will find the chat. So feel free to ask questions, whether it's technical related or just you want to share your opinions or maybe even your experiences about things. So we'll keep the chat active and I'll try to monitor it. Yeah, I've been told that not everyone is being allowed to the room. So I think I need to admit them. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. So it's not an auto admit, so I'll need to monitor that. Okay, so we have more people here and I'll keep admitting them on the go. Right, so I mentioned about the chat. You can also change the layout of how you want to see presenters, but yeah, make sure you have a view of a presentation and a person there. What's next? I'll just share my screen. So yeah, we'll be able to ask questions in Menti, and let me share a few details on how to do that. Okay, do you see my screen now? Yeah, any of the speakers, do you see my screen? Good. So what I would like to ask is for people to go to Menti. I will click present. Here you go. So if you go to menti.com and use the code shown on the screen, you will be able to answer our short survey. We'd like to gather a bit of information about the demographics, where people are from, so if we know what kind of audience we're having here. And also, it's a tryout for you to use the tool, because that's where you will be able to ask questions. We have 30 responses. Okay. So quickly then, okay, around 50 responses, mostly from Vilnius. We have few from outside, few from Kaunas and the other cities in Lithuania. Good. Around 50 responses. That's okay. Now the second question I'd like to ask you, so you should be able to see that. Where have you heard about our event? Was it Meetup, Facebook, LinkedIn, or some other way? If it's other, feel free to specify in chat. Cool. Again, we have around 50 responses, so I'll just move to the last question. So sorry for bugging you all. Here's the last question. This will be sort of a word picture. Just specify your role or your job title, so we know what kind of audience, what kind of professionals we're gathering here. Product owner probably was Christoph, wasn't it? Yeah, for those who are joining late, first of all, I'd like to apologize for not noticing that I need to allow everyone to join into the meeting room. So that's a note for the future. Now we're on menti.com, just gathering some information about you and also teaching you to use the tool. So because we'll use it for questions later on. Good, 50 responses. And then let me go to the last slide. So I will keep this slide on. I will keep the tool on for you to ask questions. So feel free to and I will share the information in chat as well if you forget where to go. So through this event, feel free to ask questions to the speakers, which we will address later on during our Q&A part. And just before I jump to Rimantas with the presentation, just wanted to thank our sponsors. So here they are, you should be able to see it. So thank you very much for Agile Coach, Omniva, Baltic, Amadeus, and Revolut for supporting Agile Lithuania organization. And also thank you for DevBridge for supporting today's meetup and Rimantas sharing their Zoom license with us. Good, and without any further ado, I would like to pass you to Rimantas.
Yeah, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me well. I'll just kind of switch to my screen share and we can kick it off. Yep. So my name is Rimantas. I am coming from DevBridge. I'm technology director, and just to give a little bit of background, how are we related with the Agile, or what experience do we have is we are a project-based company. We are using Agile for our project as well, and mentoring our clients as well. So we have a very wide portfolio of projects, different companies, different fields, different sizes. So we get a very good overview how they're managing their projects, what mistakes they're having. And today, because the title is Establishing Self-Organization, I will try to talk a little bit what happens if you actually prevent this. what happens if you force some organization methods on your teams, and in organization, what can you expect? What results can happen? And first of all, let's just start with a little bit of Agile itself. I've seen most of the people are already either product owners or Scrum Masters, so you should be knowing this pretty well. But I still want to dive a little bit and kind of pinpoint an important pieces that also play a significant role when the teams are trying to build out themselves, and when you give some flexibility for your teams, make them more autonomous. So as a definition, it's a very simple kind of what Agile is. It's like delivering the software in increments and kind of just instead of launching all of it at once, just getting the feedback, learning from that feedback, modifying your targets, and kind of giving another increment, and so on and so on and so on. So the simple diagram that could depict this is a very simple. So there are iterations of the stuff in the software lifecycle that basically you design, you build out a small increment, and you do a deployment, and then you go to another iteration, and so on and so on. It looks a very simple graph, but there is a big misconception that's already encoded in this graph already, and it seems it's a very simple, and it includes pretty much just the software development itself. It looks like the software delivery department is involved because it contains the planning, designing, and then testing and delivering. And it does not concentrate a lot actually on the delivery part, that the deploy is actually to production. It's not a QA environment, it's not UAT. You're actually deploying to your production environment. And it does not involve actually the sales process or how the software is being built and how the feedback is collected. So it looks like if you take a typical waterfall, just put it into the loops and you get the result out of it. The reality is a little bit different. If we look how the waterfall differs from the Agile, is you can clearly see in waterfall distinctions, like requirements could be gathered by the analyst, business analyst, design is done by designers, and this is the typical how big organization, enterprise organizations are already set up, and they have departments for those. When they are switching to the Agile, everything is kind of looks exactly the same, it's just in the increment. The difficulty comes out when the organization does not involve their sales cycle or the product definition cycle. We definitely observe on multiple clients that there is this attitude, like the salesman defines the product. They say we need a certain capability for us to sell, and then until it's finished, we will not be able to sell it. So development department actually goes into the increment, starts building the product, but they are unable to get the feedback. So it's pretty much, let's build the product, but until it's complete, we will not show it for the client. That kind of creates a lot of issues that I will talk about. And this is a very important piece that in the graph, it's not super kind of easy to spot, but after each deployment, you should be pushing part of the product. So it should be going live, it should be going to the client. That means that the whole organization needs to rebuild their thinking from the beginning, how they're gonna slice and dice their product to give some kind of benefit, to be useful and to be presentable for the user, and not looking at the way like build all of it incrementally inside the organization, and then we roll out for the client. And then you actually end up in the same position as doing it in waterfall approach. So why do the organization actually pick the Agile? So one of them is just a trend. Everybody moved from waterfall to Agile because they saw that largest organization like Google, Facebook, they were more efficient in actually building out the product, and they were using Agile, so everybody else needed to use the Agile. Then everybody jumped onto this bandwagon, and the reality why they want to get there is with Agile, delivering the software incrementally, you can start collecting the business value earlier. So that means you are getting some of the results earlier, and that business value does not mean just the money itself. It could be the feedback. It could be the sense how the clients are behaving, how they are using your software. So it's the reason the business value and reducing the risk is probably the biggest benefits out there, and as well you get more visibility as you're practicing the incrementally. You're practicing in one increment. You're practicing all of the items that are important. It's actually clearing out what the requirements are, building them out, testing them out, and actually deploying and verifying that the deployments work. There are multiple items. If we're looking, there are multiple flavors of Agile, and some of them are very complex. So it's like a safe framework, and we have DSDM frameworks. But sometimes this also brings another false sense of security is when large organization, enterprise organization are not able kind of to create the Agile processes themselves, they try to buy something. So they actually pick probably the most complex picture that they can find and apply into their organization. Just by hiring some consultants, they just bring as guidelines as a book, and they force it onto the organization. What happens is actually not very useful. So the organization just forces this back, and the processes does not work. So at some of the department, this lands correctly, and in some of the department, it just totally messes up the whole processes. Another flavor is Scrum. So this is the flavor that we chose for our organization, and the main reason for choosing this most simplistic way is to be flexible. As I said initially, we're working with the multiple companies at multiple Agile maturity level. Some of them are very kind of well prepared and actually rolling out it daily. Some of the companies manage to roll out something in 3 months or 6 months. So it's a very different maturity level. So we need to be nimble. We need to be kind of fast. And we chose the model that actually flexes best. And we allow our teams kind of to define further processes that work. So going to the second part, it's forced organization is not self-organization. So I will be talking, as I said in the beginning, what happens if the company just decides to force the organization rather than allow their teams to build out the processes that work. And I would probably say one of the most important pieces here is that you cannot buy Agile processes. That is, you can buy the frameworks, you can probably hire consultants, but each organization that we worked with, they have their own nuances and own people. So the people maturity, people competence is different at each company, and they need to build out those processes. They need to allow the teams, they need to allow the people actually to try to work this thing out and make it useful. If you force it, the results usually is not very good. So let's look at the question, like if the organization tried to apply some specific maybe SAFe framework or DSDM and failed, does it mean that the Agile does not work? So if looking from multiple clients that we have, and at the different maturity levels and probably different company sizes, different distributions around the world, most of them are working in Agile way. And even us, as a vendor, when we're coming in as a consultant, we always choose Agile over any kind of waterfall. We don't even engage with the clients that do not work in Agile way, because we did find that even trying kind of to move the organizations that are kind of doing waterfall, budgeting, planning, and fixed bid projects, it does not work for us well, and we are unable to help them. So it does work, but there are some prerequisites required. So there are a couple of points that I want to stress out. What are those prerequisites to make it work? Is one of the manifesto items is people over the process. So it kind of clearly binds to the topic of self-organizing, because if you have people, so either you have to organize them or they will kind of do it themselves. And if, while Agile says like it's individual over the process, so it means that the team is the core in this process, and the processes is just kind of additional thing that the team describes, or the team actually defines themselves. And another part is it's a team effort. And as I said before, it's not just the delivery team or one department, it's throughout all of the departments. So they need to be stitched up together. And that means the accountability stays in one place. Often, when I showed in the waterfall, most of the organization have all of the steps set for the departments, and the department is responsible or accountable only for one piece. And when you try to dump them into the Agile process, it suddenly becomes like everyone works together, but you don't have anyone responsible for the outcome. So this is a very important piece, that it's a team effort and everybody is responsible or accountable for the result. And non-obvious people or departments should be onboarded as well. I already talked about the delivery team. This is the easiest place. The developers, testers, DevOps, whatever, all of the engineers is pretty simple. But do put also the departments that are application support, that are security, that are sales. They have to be on board with all of this process as well to make it successful. And they need to provide the input while defining the processes. If they are left out and you give the process definitions as individuals and interactions over processes, and you say for the development department, come up with your processes, they will probably miss out on the item that the security, application support team or sales teams require as well. And the most probably biggest challenge is to make sure that it's not about faster coding. It's not actually making developers write code faster or do the business analysis faster or whatever piece you pick from there. The Agile will not kind of make it faster. The people will not start typing quicker. It's all about actually being more aligned and producing the result that's relevant. So it's not wasting, it's more just kind of concentrating on the items that most matters. So knowing that it works, I will probably talk about the traps of this Agile, and the traps when big enterprise organizations try to force the organization of teams and organization of processes on their teams. What do they get, and where are the biggest challenges for them? So there is a big distinction between the chaos and structure. So it's pretty much like organized or self-organized. So this is a very big problem to overcome when switching from waterfall or switching from rigid structure to a structure that's more around the teams and giving the autonomy for the teams. It's pretty much, I would say it in a blunt, it's trusting your people. So it's trusting your team that they will find the way to work and find the way to work more efficiently than it's defined right now. So most of the big organizations tend to try to have a specific structure. Even if they're building the Agile, they want to write out the guidelines, they want to define all of the exceptions, they want to get everyone into kind of lattices. so they have all of their work defined and just follow the guidelines. Normally, the projects are totally different. All of them are different. The teams are different. So the issues that are facing is always different, and the general guidelines, either they're overgeneralizing everything and making less effective, or they are not covering the cases and not allowing people kind of to find the most effective way to work. So this is one of the things to look out, is actually trusting your people, trusting your teams to be able to come up with the ways of working that are efficient for the company. I wanted kind of to illustrate what happens with this over monitoring or not trusting your people and trying kind of to get some metrics. It's through the story of the people that are appearing usually when the agile teams are created. So it's a prick and build. If you look at the Bill Lumberg, probably anyone who's seen the Office space would know this guy. What happens when the company creates the agile teams? They decide to go the agile processes, create the agile teams, and then they figure out that they don't know how to do things. So the idea is pretty simple. Idea is to create new processes in the company as they're seeing their competitors are moving faster than they are. So they need to change something, and the company decides to call in consultants. They will help out with getting the agile practices in place. And because the software is the one that's late, they'll just kind of dump it on the delivery department. So they'll sort it out in the development department. So what happens? So meet a couple of the new guys that will work together with those teams. One of them is Brick, and it's a person that has people skills. He's going to be working with the developers because they are new. They've been in the software development, maybe test engineers that they've been in testing department. He will be kind of stitching them together. He will go to the business people, because developers cannot talk to business people, and translate their requirements for development teams, and set the expectation and deadlines. One of the biggest problems that happens is that Prick actually puts the deadline himself without consulting the team and setting the expectation for business to be happy, also without consulting the team. Because Prick does not consult with the team kind of does not get into the cadence, and they always fail, either being late or not doing what's expected. So the bill is introduced, and the bill will be looking after the team and making sure they are as efficient as possible and actually delivering to the Prick's promises. So what happens when those two of the people are introduced? It's a Prick and Bill cycle. It's when the Prick sets the unrealistic expectations for the team, and the team does not deliver, he wants to micromanage and understand what happened with the team. So the Bill actually is the person that actually goes to the team and asks for different reports, why the people are late. Is it the requirements not clear? Is it the estimations are not clear? So he starts micromanaging. To micromanage, of course, he needs to get some of the input from the development team. So he gets the most experienced person on the team to do the reporting, because he knows what he's talking about and he's able to talk to business. And it kind of reduces the team output even more. Then they fail again, and then it's kind of the cycle kind of turns and turns, and that kind of gets inefficient kind of agile, where you kind of have ceremonies going on. So there is There are sprints, there are sprint plannings, there are all of the things included, but the result is not there. And I've seen the companies where they have SAFe implemented and they are doing the PI planning, and the teams are actually loading their sprints with more capacity than their team has. So it's like it's 120% or 130%, which automatically means that they will fail because they are loading more than they can manage. And this is kind of real companies and real people. And that kind of just puts this unrealistic cycle for Agile. It's just like doing the sprints, doing the ceremonies, but not getting any value out of it. So what happens when this kind of goes in? Actually, all of the stuff gets back into this water scrum fall, because the development still tries to do incrementally with their own agenda, but then everything else kind of move outside, and you get this totally inefficient item that does not work. So what really matters? What really matters if we're looking to get like a proper Agile teams and have a good result? So basically, it's just primary two things. It's a team and the result. So one of the most important items in here is teams, having a team that's autonomous and actually defining their cadence, defining their deadlines and committing to them. And however the good teams are, you still want to kind of look for the results. And then you actually look at the results, whether the team delivers on their promises. So what's important about teams and what changes like from normal perspective into this Agile kind of mindset? So one of the things is actually having a good connection between different competencies. As I said, the department needs to go together. It's a very difficult task actually to run the process across the departments if you still keep the processes in an old-fashioned way. So their responsibilities are scattered around. Nobody's accountable for the whole project. So it's very important not kind of to have a point where there is no accountability or no responsible people. Where we see those issues most visible, it's primary infrastructure, application support, and security teams. So even if you get the project running, even if you deploy, even test out, and you get the feedback from your stakeholders, suddenly before going to production, you find out that you need to fill out big questionnaires for security. Then the application support comes in with their own requirements, and then you spend huge amounts of time actually trying to sort out their requirements, even though they could be called initially and kind of sort this out before. So as I said, there is a big difference while transitioning. The normal rigid structure is very hierarchical, and it's clear kind of separation what you're responsible for. In Agile team, it's way fluid, and the team needs to self-organize. So they build out on the result, not on the competence. So you need kind of to make sure that you allow your teams, if they are getting all of the competences, you cannot make it responsible for the items if they don't have any competence there. So you cannot make Agile team responsible for delivery if you don't put any delivery guys in there, or you cannot make them responsible for security if they don't have any security guys or any security resources for them to make. Another big change that happens is a skill change. So when the teams were pretty rigid and they had a clear boundaries what they're doing, it was pretty simple. So they know when the people are moved towards Agile, it means they get this additional requirement of self-organizing. The self-organizing does not come up not everyone actually knows how to kind of plan their time, how to make efficient, how to raise the issue, how to talk to other team members. So this is a very important piece as well, that when you're putting the agile processes in place, you have to think about the people as well. It's not just teaching them agile ways or coaching them in agile, but also teaching them soft skills or different kind of communication skills and different kind of responsibilities that they're handling. Because when self-organizing, you are actually giving them responsibilities, but they have to know how to kind of how to tackle those. And also the other part is the results. So this is a very important piece on the results. I already showed this this slide, and I want to stress again the deployment piece. And the deployment piece is done. It changes what done in the team means. So the done means it's in a production, it's used by the client. It does not mean that it's in UAT, we'll be able to launch it when we want. The done means that I will not be touching that piece again unless there is a requirement change or bugs surface. It means that the team is done. I've seen a lot of cases where organizations apply the agile and then they have a very flexible done because of all of the entanglements with other departments and not having ability kind of to not having responsibility of actually finishing it off. They just simply say, okay, so we'll claim the point, but then we'll just come back and kind of sort it out. It's 5-minute things. We'll sort it out. And that kind of breaks down all of the this stop at any point cycle and forces kind of to have half-baked product in the middle. So you're basically getting back into waterfall Scrum. And there are additional kind of positions that surfaced to kind of bridge the gap between the departments or bridge the gap between the capabilities. Is the DevOps and DevSecOps. So it's also very important to embed those people which usually been in the infrastructure department. They have to move towards the development and kind of bridge the gap. I would probably sometimes argue that the DevOps is not a specific position, but rather the mindset that could be picked up by the whole team. But it's also a prerequisite to have this full capability of product delivery. So to finish this off is, I think the major point is trusting your people, and if you trust them, they will find a way. One of the note here, I would say that is, if you don't trust your people and you want to put the processes on top of them, that means you have already a bigger problem than just kind of sorting out the processes. That means some of the people probably not at the right place, or you should not be having them. And that's kind of conclude my talk. Thank you, everyone. You can kind of post questions. I'll stay till the end, and we'll be able to pick up the questions after all of the presentations are done.
Thank you very much, Rimantas. We'll pass on to Ornella. So I think I've unmuted you. If not, I'm trying. Yeah, now.
One, two. Fine. Hopefully everyone can hear me.
Good. Yeah, we can. So yeah, we'll jump on to your presentation just in a second. To both remaining presenters, don't feel like you need to rush. We'll have plenty of time. We can extend our meeting, so it's all good, and we'll address the questions to everyone after the presentations. Just a note to the audience, feel free to go to Menti, ask questions, but also don't forget to vote on other questions so that we have a priority list of things to ask. That's it from me. Word is yours.
So, thank you. I'll start from introducing myself briefly, and just we'll try it. Oh, here how it goes. So my name is Ornella, and I work as an Agile coach at a company called Treatwell. I've been learning and practicing Agile for over 5 years now. And I wanted to share some rather more important things about me than my past companies and roles. You can definitely check them out on LinkedIn if you're interested. But for me, it's more important to tell a bit more about my personal motivation and personal strengths. So here it goes. I'm really motivated and practically driven by curiosity, teamwork, and goals or objectives. So this is three major themes that kind of cascades throughout all the things I do at work. It also enabled me to excel in things like continuous improvement, working or enabling high-performing teams, and agile leadership. So I guess you will notice certain aspects of those things surfacing in the presentation that I'm gonna give you today. To those who are a bit bored of repeatedly hearing about theory, I want to apologize in advance. I will repeat some of the things, maybe take safety in knowing that repetition is a key to mastery, and maybe you will be able still to hear something new and widen your perspective. By the end of the presentation, I will share some practical examples of how to enable self-organization. So if you just bear with me, ones who are asking for more hands-on, how to tips and tricks, I promise to deliver that at the end of the slides. So if we go forward with the presentation and the topic of today, it's about principle number 11 of Agile Manifesto, and I thought that I could even improve it a little bit because as we know from the context, Agile Manifesto was built mostly from software engineers, yet the core of the principle can be extended to many more results than architecture's requirements or designs. Best client service, best collaboration, best improvements of the way of working within the team also emerges from self-organization. So I want to dwell a little bit more into the core ideas behind Agile and that particular principle. And for that, I'm gonna talk a bit about the Agile mindset. And here on the left, some of you may recognize an Agile onion. And for those who don't know what Agile onion is, I'll give you a brief explanation. So it in general encompasses all the things that we kind of call agile. So there's definitely tools and processes in the middle of it, and there's a mystical beast agile mindset on top of that. And the onion's idea is that the things in the middle are easier to spot, easier to see, but they are not as powerful as things on the top. So the things like principles, values, or mindset is definitely harder to see, to notice, or to observe, but they have more impact and more power. So to talk about mindset specifically, I want to use a powers definition of agile mindset. It kind of looks into three core beliefs. So the first one is a proactive belief. So belief goes that we trust people to want to improve. So the continuous improvement is something that's rather natural to all of us. And instead of, looking for how to screw things up, we are going and looking how to improve things on our day-to-day basis. The second belief, and I think it resonates very well with what Raymond said at the end of his presentation, is that people believe. So people believe is all about trust. So you hire people and you trust they are able to do a job. So it comes with unconditional positive regards to the people that you work with. So basically you don't think that someone is not meeting your expectations because they're evil and they don't want to meet your expectations. There could be some other possible problems to that, but it's never the ill-mindedness of people. And the third belief, I think, is the most relevant in the terms of explaining self-organization and its importance in the entire agile mindset, is a complexity belief. So complexity belief states that we operate mostly in a complex domain. Well, in my own experience, I would rarely meet someone who would fundamentally disagree with Agile principles. Yet I meet quite often people who, despite the fact that in theory they would agree with the self-organization principle, their actions would not correspond to that. And I found it extremely powerful to be able to articulate or explain the complexity or specifically maybe complex adaptive systems to the people, and kind of create this metaphor where they can understand why self-organization is such a crucial part into making things work in primarily product development systems, product development context. So the statement is as simple as product development is complex. And it means that we can not necessarily predict the outcomes that our actions will have on a wider system. So complex adaptive systems in general takes input from the outside context of the outside environment. They are able to self-organize and emerge based on the feedback loops, and they are spitting out the output as a result of how they perceive the existing context or existing environment, right? So the example could be that our founder of Treatwell usually gives as a example to our culture. So we had a situation where our product support is enabled to compensate the vouchers for certain mishaps in service supplier, and it happened that certain people decided to abuse the system. So the context of our environment changed. There were people suddenly who decides to misuse the given authority, misuse the given responsibility, and find the workarounds to benefit from the vouchers given to actually deal with unhappy clients. So as a self-organizing entity, organization decided that, well, we value the ability to be flexible and respond to customers' requests fast. So to this, we responded by firing people rather than implementing the constraints to the system itself. I had very similar situation also involving vouchers in different contexts, in different environment, in different company. And in that particular company, situation went a different way. So same situation, people mistreating, misusing the system, and the organization reacted to that change in the environment and decided to force the more governance on the system. So creating more strict rules about who has access to providing vouchers, creating a little bit more obstacles to client support agents themselves to take responsibility and provide the compensation for unhappy customers. So the idea is that at the end of the day, both organizations expect us to have the same outcome, right? And if we would have a simple or even complicated situation, we would have same context, same trigger to the system, and even though the result or approach to the problem was different, we would expect that it would generate the same outcome. Because we operate in complex adaptive systems, outcome, as you most probably can imagine, in both of those organizations were dramatically different. So the first example that I provided from Treatwell kind of supported the entire culture of our organization. This became an anecdote that pretty much every new joiner gets told as an illustration of how we value responsibility and freedom. In other organizations, suddenly the values that were printed all over the walls on the corridors of the office became dead. Basically, people got the cognitive dissonance of what's been done and what company is telling. So it impacted not only client support organization, but a wider organization as well. And it just illustrates the fact that in our domain, in product development organizations and organizations that in general works with technology and with people, we operate under complex domain, and not all the things, not all the actions that we take, we can predict in 100% certainty give the outcomes that we want. And for that, we rely on different ways of working. And this is a core to my understanding to what Agile is. And one other thing that is extremely important to mention here is that without self-organization, we lose ability to adapt and learn. So if we get into the more constrained system that requires approval on all the decisions getting made, we're not able to react to the new insights. And that obviously impacts the results, the speed of delivery, motivation of people, and just, gets into this negative spiral if we do not address or treat our context as a complex context. So moving forward, another extremely important bit of enabling self-organization is actually leadership. So in both provided examples, leadership took the action or took a decision, and that decision had the bigger impact than we probably had anticipated in the given situation. Then I look into more local examples of when self-organization in teams failing. I usually find a very similar pattern going over and over again. So in order to actually allow people to be autonomous, to make decisions based on the insights that are available to them, many leaders need to let go of their ego. And it's very hard for some people to understand that they will not be the single source of decision making, a single place where everyone relies on, to provide guidance. That this requires to have trust in your people, but as well being in just a more flexible mindset. And I think Einstein said that, ego goes as one divided by knowledge. So basically, more knowledge you have, the less ego you'll have. And it hasn't been, sadly, my experience with many leaders, that they assume that they know many things, and they expect everyone to follow the very strict process guidelines. They enforce certain rules to the teams, hoping that this will help to maintain control, that this will make them understand what is happening. And I think that not being able to understand the complexity and that we are operating in a complex domain is that faulty illusion that someone, any human being basically, is able to understand the entire context of what is happening. So I also worked with a bunch of great leaders, and all of them are very supportive and always in more of a servant leadership type of behavior. So those type of leaders would not jump to a solution to a problem. They would rather help you as an individual to see and discover the insights in your surrounding context, and enable you to make a decision, either you as an individual or you as a bigger group or a wider team. So role of the leaders in this is pretty crucial. Without support of the leaders, without leaders letting go of their egos, self-organization, in my experience, is rarely possible. And then if we go to a little bit more practical bit, so let's say we have an agile mindset embedded in the organization, we have culture that supports it, we have leaders that empowers it, it still kind of could be challenging to set the teams to the success in the self-organization. So I consider Treatwell to being a model organization in all of those aspects, in mindset and culture, in leaders that we work with. Yet quite recently I had a challenge to empower one of our rather informal work groups to self-organize and to achieve results. And now I'll maybe talk a little bit of the model that I used and the example that I did and how it turned out. So I used the triangle of self-organization, and the triangle of self-organization talks about skills, goals, and rules, or rather constraints that are enabling rather than governing. And the situation that I had was with our front-end community in the company. So our front-end guys increased in numbers quite recently, and it became a bit more challenging for them to have their chapter meetings effective or efficient. They had a slight understanding of where we want to go as a group of people, as a community. There are also some implicit expectations from wider organization, where other people outside of that group expected this group to take ownership or make changes or make improvements. And it became just a stressful situation for everyone. So several people asked me to help out to facilitate the group discussion, so the end result would become a more enabled, more self-organizing group of front-enders that are able to achieve more specified goals for themselves and for the organization. So I addressed the problem from the rules perspective, and it may sound a little bit, counterintuitive, because we tend to talk about, people and interactions being over process and tools. But then I say rules, I don't really mean process and tools. What I mean is more structured management of the people interactions. And this setting of the specific constraints for a group of people actually helps them to self-organize without those boundaries. So the reality is that if we are not setting any boundaries to the group of people, they will not know how to self-organize. And here it was clear that the group of people had their specific skill set and their specific skills. So these skills, first of all, needed to be matched to the goals that that the group themselves raise and that organization imposes to that group. And it just by having conversation, by looking and inspecting the group dynamics and their own expectations to themselves, it became clear that certain goals that we were raising to that group were not able to achieve due to the fact that some skill set was missing in there. And for the constraints, it was also a little bit of the flawed dynamics between group of the people, because some people were interested in one part and other people were interested a little bit in the other part, and it was very hard for them to kind of work in an aligned way. So having certain constraints, like identifying a domain leader for that group, and examples would be that a single person who is very passionate about design system takes a role of the domain leader in that particular field, and the other people in the group is able to communicate what kind of expectations they have to the specific role of a domain leader. We also identified that whenever management comes to facilitate the meetings, hoping to actually make them smoother for the group, it creates additional friction to the group. And they don't really like that. They like to have a little bit more spaced organic conversations. So we came to the agreement that we need to have a dedicated person within that group that would take organizational bit of the table and would take care of it. So basically booking the meetings, keeping up with meeting notes, involving with additional stakeholders if additional stakeholders needs to be involved. And this also created the clarity. So people in that group currently has a clear expectation who to ask to do changes to the meeting. And this was communicated to the wider organization. So wider organization also has a bigger reliance on that group's self-organization because they know who's responsible for what. So self-organization is something that has to be nurtured. Even if we believe in it, even if all the prerequisites are ticked, it still is not something that happens automatically. And for us as a leaders, as a managers, agile coaches, or anyone who has an impact on this environment, it's important to adjust the environment within the self-organization should happen. So this particular model, a triangle of self-organization, helps to understand what kind of different parameters can or sometimes need to be tweaked in order for people to self-organize within certain boundaries. And it's important so that skills, goals, and those constraints be in alignment and would match each other or would be in equilibrium. In other words, like if I have skills and I have an ambition goal, but I did not have a mandate to make decisions, so the rules are too strict, it will limit my ability to self-organize. If I have a very ambitious goals, I have a huge mandate to make decisions, yet I lack skills, I will still struggle to self-organize within a given boundaries. So it's really important to address all three simultaneously and set up the environment for people to actually flourish and self-organize that given boundaries. And this kind of concludes what I've been prepared to talk to you about today. Just maybe before you go to listen to Krista's presentation, I will quickly recap on what I found as the key lessons of self-organization throughout those 5+ years of experience with Agile teams. So mindset is more powerful than any process and tools. Just knowing or believing to the principle will not enable you to act upon it. So work on your mindset, work on the people around your mindset, and cannot stress this enough. Without mindset, it will be tremendously hard to make any positive change or make a agile transformation, if you want to use that type of terminology. And next bullet point is that, in my experience, pretty much everyone can self-organize. In the context that we work and the people that we work, everyone is able of self-organization. If they are not self-organizing, it could be that it's either leadership not supporting it, either it's a mismatch between expectations or restrictions, goals or skills, but to given proper environment, to creating a proper boundaries, everyone is able of self-organization. And self-organization is not a binary thing. So there's a range of it. So if you want to improve or foster it, start from smaller and build up on that. It has a tremendous value. So if you truly believe in the principle that only by self-organization we are able to achieve best possible designs, architectures, or any other work or results that collaborating people can achieve, you need to foster this continuously as a leader or as a participant of that group. And then the last key bit is that don't try to change people. Don't think that, oh, I'd like people to self-organize, but they don't do that. It's people that we need to address. It's really not. It's the environment. First, maybe it's you. Like check your ego first. If you're allowing self-organization to happen, if you are not, just all surface saying, oh yes, self-organization is great. I would love my teams to, do that thing on their own, but then insisting everyone to come for approval, insisting everyone to ask your opinion before any decision is made. So first, check if it's not you who is restricting people in your groups to self-organize. And if it's not, then try to adjust the environment, create the environment where people could be self-organized, and then adjust the triangle all the time, increase the size of the triangle. So the space, the boundaries for self-organization would be just improving and improving. This will result in improving and improving results of the teams that you work with. And that is it from me. Hope that you enjoyed it.
And you give a hint for us to clap, so I'll do that. Thank you very much for your presentation and your view. Okay, we'll now move to Krista. So Krista, feel free to share your slides, and I'm trying to unmute you. I think you're now unmuted.
Yes, hello,
yes,
can you hear me?
Very good. Again, take your time, go through your bits. Don't feel that you need to rush. And reminder for everyone else, we'll have a Q&A after, so feel free to raise and prioritize questions on Menti. There's info on the chat. Thank you very much. And Krista, off you go.
Yeah, so just to double check, you see my screen and you also hear me, right? Good, good. So yes, my name is Krista Marena and I'm actually a product owner at Danske Bank. And as you can see, I've been passionately digitizing delivery of products and services for our customers for the past couple of years. And today, since I've been a product owner in my role, I will be speaking about the self-organized teams a little bit from the leadership point of view. And also, Ornella already indicated some of the interesting points that actually will also be visible in my presentation today. And when I think about self-organized teams, and specifically from the leadership point of view, the very first thing I would like to start my presentation with is the thing that's called responsibility trap. Many of you might have heard about it before, but basically what that is when you have a leader who is over passionate and feels extremely responsible of the deliveries and is with such a strong sense of responsibility that it leads to team being less engaged and therefore taking less ownership and being less responsible. And so the less responsible the team feels for the deliverable, the more responsible and frustrated the leader gets and feels like he or she has to do even more. And so it's really like a vicious circle that you cannot get out of, because the more leader does, the less team does, and the less team does, the more leader feels like he or she has to do. So it's really like a trap that is trapping you in, and it's very difficult to get out of it. And if any of you feel like you have been in this position at some point in your lives, you can rest assured that you are not the only one out there, because if we are looking at the leaders that we have, actually vast majority of those are the ones that are called expert leaders. Those are the little know-it-alls that often have been experts within the field that they have been promoted to leaders to. So they often would know many things down to the very specific details. And so they would always have the right answers to the questions. And there is nothing wrong about being this kind of a leader. It's just very difficult for the team to ever become self-organized when you have a leader that has all the answers for you lined out. And as you can see, the vast majority of our leaders are expert leaders. The next one in line would be a leader that is achiever. He or she is highly focused on results, even in a way that it would be okay for that leader if the soldiers are left behind, so to speak. As long as you achieve your results, as long as you achieve your goals, you consider that a success. Again, nothing wrong about this leader. It's just very difficult for the teams to define their pace, define their goals, if you always have a leader breathing down your neck. And again, 35% of our leaders are achievers, which is quite a bit of them out there. And then the third one, which is just 10%, is the leaders that are called catalysts. And in my opinion, those would be the prerequisite for a self-organized team, because those are the ones much more focused on allowing the team to be also setting their pace, setting their way of working, and allowing them to self-organize. Then again, a lot of you might think that there are those leaders that are very fluffy, that don't know the vision, that they don't know the mission, and they're actually not really helping the team, and because they are just simply too far away. And that's also not it. Obviously, you still need to have vision, mission. You still have to be able to guide the team when it's needed, but you have to have this good balance between being too far away and being too much involved. And just for the record, not that I'm nailing being a catalyst leader, my preference or my natural preference is to be much more the achiever. I'm very much focused on results, but it's just good for yourself if you can put yourself into any of these boxes to once in a while be aware that you are kind of that type of a leader. And if your end goal is for the team to be self-organized, that might actually hinder you from that. So keep this in mind if you think about specifically about the responsibility trap, and if you are of any type of leaders for product owners, agile coaches, scrum masters, even lead developers or lead analysts for that matter. So it does apply for different roles and different scenarios if you wish. And knowing all of this, I have gathered obviously some of my own experiences working at Danske Bank as a product owner that I would like to share with you more specifically with my hands-on knowledge. So if you want the team to be self-organized, and this will be super basic and super simple, but for me, it's always been about the right people that you have in your team. And if an organization was a boat of 10 people, on average, you would have maybe 30% of people, or the 3 people out of your boat that are actively engaged. They love what they do. They drive your results. They drive your performance. Then around 5 people or 50% of your people would be those that don't really care. They kind of survive the day and they are just there. And it could be because the leadership is bad. It could be because they don't really like what they are doing. But half of the people are usually indifferent. And then you have the rest of the 20% or 2 people in your boat that might even actively work against you or being actively disengaged. So if your organization is a boat, you have to make sure that you find the people that are engaged, that own things, that feel responsible of things, because those are the ones that are much more likely, from my experience, to be able to self-organize and to be able to run the projects together with other people and even engage other people. So it's very important to spot them. It's very important if you ever have a chance to form your own team, to hire for the things that you are doing. It's very important that you have the right people on board. And actually, if I even think a bit further from my own experience, again, if I'm given an X amount of money or budget, if I can afford 10 people, I much rather take 5 that are engaged, that love what they do, rather than take 10 because I can afford. So it's not about the quality, the quantity. It's really about the quality of the people. And of course, it sounds a little bit wrong when you speak about quality of the people, but what I really mean is people that like what they do, that are actively engaged and owning the things, because those teams definitely are much more likely to be able to self-organize. So definitely get the right people on board. Secondly, from my own experience, again, you have to find and define the right team size. So when a team is very, very big, and usually for development team, it should be 7 people plus minus 2 maybe. So whenever it gets over 10, for any type of leader, it's very difficult to manage that kind of team, let alone for the team to be able to self-organize. So it's really important that you also have the right team size. And specifically why I want to talk about this is because at Danske Bank, I was given a project that had super high priority, tough deadlines, the usual story. And what the program management kind of thought would solve the problem is if we dedicated a lot of resources to that problem. So basically the problem is big and it's important, so let's put more people on it because then we have higher chances of succeeding, which actually is not the case, because one of the very first things that I wanted to insist on doing is that we reduce the amount of people. And we did indeed reduce the amount of people by 40%, which is not a popular decision. It was also not a decision that it's easy to communicate, because usually you would scream for more resources because you have to deliver things. Our message was the opposite. We had to tell to the people that we need less of you, because we need you to be focused. We need you to be able to know what your tasks are. And in that way, teams can also be much better at organizing themselves. Because if you have more than 10 people, it's quite difficult, because you would naturally have somebody who's stepping in as a leader and starts taking the lead and starts to take the initiative. So for the team to be able to self-organize, the right team size also matters. To continue, the next big thing in my book is definitely a short path to decisions. And of course, in ideal world, you would have a self-organized team that can take all the decisions and move forward on their own. But being part of big organizations, that's rarely the case. We often have many decisions that are outside team's power. So you have legal considerations, you have risk considerations, you have budgets that you have to adhere to, many decisions that go on somewhere outside the team's reach. And so it's very important that team does have a leader that they can reach out to make sure that decisions are made somewhat quickly and they are done somewhat locally, so to speak. There is nothing that kills the self-organization more than decisions that are pending for weeks or even months. So it's a little bit of a joke if we expect the team to self-organize and then they are dependent on 5 different decisions that are just somewhere in the organization. So if there is a chance, we should make sure that teams always get fast decision making. And even if the decisions cannot be made fast, then it's a quick feedback about why the decisions cannot be made fast. But definitely something very important if you're looking into fostering the self-organization within the teams. And one of my last points, but definitely not least, is that you have to prioritize fun. And again, might sound very basic, but I have a interesting, I think, interesting story to tell about this, is that as a product owner, you have a possibility to obviously prioritize development teams' work. It's up to you to decide what gets done first, what gets done second. And so you would often have a situation where you as a product owner bring a problem to the development team, and after assessing, after analysis, they would come back to you and say, basically there are 3 scenarios. Scenario A, we can do something super quick and dirty. It would do the job, maybe some technical debt, but it would be super quick. Then the scenario 2, something that would be an average way how to solve it. And then something that's scenario 3, that is maybe something that one could think is a little bit of overkill, but might be a little bit more experimental, something that they haven't tried before, something that they haven't done before. Maybe it takes a little bit longer time, but actually is a bit more fun to do. And so I started to turn the question around and ask the team, what is more fun to work on? And in the beginning, developers would be quite surprised and asked, how is that even relevant? Why would you ask me that? And then I would say that, yes, for me as a product owner, it's important that you are engaged, because then you drive your things much, much better. So for me, if the option 3 is the most fun for you, because you will learn something new, you will experiment, and you will actually own this task or item, then I might be okay that we spend a little more time on solving this problem, because you will gain so much more in a long run. And obviously, as a product owner, it's a tough call, because in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I have to maximize the value out of the time they spend on solving something. So of course, something quick would be amazing, but sometimes you have to allow the team to spend maybe more time on something, because it's so much more fun for them. And that way they get this ownership, or they feel this ownership, because they have decided to go for the option 3 that is something for them to own. And so in my experience, that definitely increases the ability to be more engaged, and also therefore be self-organized as a team much more as well. And so to sum up, main takeaways from my side would be definitely find the right people. From my experience, that's the, if you remember one thing from this presentation, remember it's the right people. Don't remember the cat memes. Remember that it's all about the people. It's the right team size, even if that means uncomfortable decisions. It might be that you might need to reduce the amount of people you have in your team. Make sure there are short path to decisions. There is nothing that kills self-organization more than decisions that are pending for weeks and months. And make sure you have fun. And of course, do stay away from the responsibility trap. It's very difficult to get out of that once you're in it. So do stay away from it. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I assume we can move forward to the questions.
That is correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm kind of unmuting our speakers now. I think, yeah, all four of us are unmuted.
Thank you, Krista. I love the bit about prioritizing fun. It's really inspiring to hear it from product owner.
Thanks. Yeah, it was a weird choice, so to speak, because I said for product owners, you want everything yesterday. So it is difficult to prioritize something that would take longer time, but it is worth it.
We agree, and I will remember the cat memes too. So yeah, what we'll do now is we'll have maybe not half an hour long, but a Q&A, a sort of panel discussion. There are quite a few questions raised both in Menti and in chat, so I'll try to facilitate this as much as possible. What I can feel is that people are really hungry for practical experiences, less theory, more practice. So all the questions, I will let's try the answers to be sort of from your own experience rather than sort of high level theory. So I'll start with one opening question. Whoever wants to jump on first, feel free. So from what I've heard is that self-organization is sort of a two-way street. On one side, you have managers and leaders who need to stop controlling, releasing control, releasing ownership. And on the other side, you have teams who need to start owning, start embracing self-organization. Could you give examples from your environments of this working, this two-way street existing? I hope the question was clear. If not, feel free to clarify. If you need a second to think, also that's fine.
I'm just waiting for the girls to pick it up. I'm the only guy here.
I just stopped speaking, so I was about to give you the word.
Yes, Rimantas, you have most time to relax after your presentation.
So I can answer from we are kind of a vendor, so I'm kind of coming from a little bit different background. So we are actually working with a different client at the different positions. And normally we are working pretty much up to 50 projects at one single time. So it's a necessity for us to have a pretty autonomous teams that can run themselves and can actually adapt to different kinds of clients, as it's a big spectrum of those. So it's just a matter of growing up the teams. So it's multiple items involved in actually being able to give out a responsibility into the teams and rather have a small amount of touch. So it's one of the things is actually build out the team. So it's you'll never be putting like all of the juniors in a single team and expect that it's going to be effectively kind of self-organizing itself. So this is one thing. Another thing, we do not penalize the teams if they're unable to do something that's not allowed by the clients or they're hindered by the clients. So they do have the responsibility in a place where they can make a change or where they kind of have any kind of impact. So that's probably. Is it? just one person that's saying the echo is really bad, or is it everyone sharing?
You can hear some sirens.
Yeah, it's just because it seems that I'm the only one in the office and the alarm went off.
Okay.
So I can be expected to actually dragged out, but I'll
The
sort it
security
out
guys
later.
will drag you out soon.
Wow, that would be an action movie instead of Meetup. I
Oh,
secretly
yeah.
can't wait for that.
Okay, so now it should be gone, so it should be okay. I'll figure out whether it's gonna go back, then I'll just kind of jump and have a call with the security company. Yeah, so this is how we kind of give out those responsibilities to our teams, as we are unable kind of to be everywhere at the same time. So also we get a little bit of natural requirement for the team to drive themselves, because we are working for, we're working for mostly our clients are US based. So we have a pretty large time difference, and the team is working before actually PMs wake up in US. So they have to have the responsibility of actually making all of the moves, questions, and decisions themselves before it can actually goes to the other end. So this is how we kind of structure our work, and some of the items are helping us out as well in there. Hopefully I kind of answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe we can move to other speakers.
Oh, I could add a few things to how I address the two-way street problem. So I guess in comparison to Rimantas or Krista, my position is a little bit different, because as an Agile coach, I work more as a mediator between that. So usually I would have a someone in not necessarily responsibility tribe, but somewhere close to it, complaining that team is not taking ownership, or not self-organizing, or that you need to, give them everything on the silver plate, and how to change that, right? So it usually has some sort of pre-existing beliefs about people, and as an Agile coach, I try to have a conversation where the root cause comes from. And usually it's just expectations that are not voiced clearly. So a person has an implicit expectation to the group of people, and expects people to know what are expected, even though it's just implied and never said out loud. So just by working with the managers or leaders who are on the most stressed end of responsibilities, to help them to communicate the expectations to the team in a clearer way, creates a space for conversations to happen. And to my experience, people are not really avoiding ownership, or they are not really not wanting to self-organize. They simply are used that decisions are made. They are not left space to think. They don't feel like the responsibility is delegated properly. So it's just like mediating between those two streams, and making sure that they just get aligned.
Makes sense. Krista, do you have an opinion on this side?
Well, nothing that hasn't been mentioned before. So I think there were plenty of questions, so we can just maybe take some other questions to make sure we cover as many as possible.
Exactly, sounds good. So let's try to be kind of specific so that we can cover more questions. I'll try to rephrase them as well. I'm looking at the Menti questions on the priority order. So this one, the first one says, what worked and did not in your organization? So rephrasing, maybe you could, how would you assess the level of self-organization in your teams, and maybe where do you see a lack, or kind of a next move to make it more a higher level self-organizing teams?
Mm-hmm. And actually then I can at least open up from my perspective that obviously many times self-organization hasn't been working or doesn't work properly. And I wouldn't even, necessarily blame anybody for it, but still agile way of working or even having that kind of mindset, although in theory it's very old, in practice, at least in bigger organizations, it's still something completely new. People still refer to agile as something new. It is old, but nevertheless for big organizations it's something new. So it's almost that people don't really have this kind of experience that, okay, now I have to self-organize, or now I have to think, and now I have to take a decision, and nobody will blame me for the fact that we, I don't know, made a maybe wrong decision, we experimented, we failed, but we learned something from it. So I think it's, of course, some of these things you can facilitate and you can teach the organization, but it's in its essence, it is about change management, and people don't change their behavior overnight. So I think it's perfectly fine that if an organization has started working agile, that it does take time for people to even get into this kind of way of thinking about things, that we are a team, so we own this, and we drive it, and we are responsible, and we make decisions, and it's us and not our leader who will be responsible of it. So yes, it fails and not always works, and it takes time, but my point would be that it does take time, and you cannot get there overnight. So I think, of course, the more you do it, the more you implement it, the more that's supported, the better your chances will be in the future to get to self-organization. So it takes time.
Good point. Anyone want to add anything?
If to look into the question, as far as I understood, is where do we stand on self-organization, and what's the next steps where we are planning to go? So for teams that I work with, the current scope within which we self-organize is a development cycle. So basically, after we complete the inception of a product and up to the product increment being kicked off through the door to the customer, and the next step for us would be to expand it to a little bit more of the upstream and downstream activities, so the team would be more engaged and more curious and more aware of what is happening in the inception stage and what is happening at the other end of the feedback loop, where we collect and analyze the data to kind of close the loop of the increment that we have built. So this would be a next step for at least the teams that I work with.
Makes sense. Yeah, good answer. Clementis, anything to add from your side? Yes. I need to unmute.
Yeah, so from my side, I can probably just put a quick note what actually kills all of the self-organization very easily. It's actually doing some of the processes, just asking for the team's opinion and then not listening to it. That's kind of, you'll probably get couple of these kind of events, and then you can forget about the self-organization. The team will just actually drop out and try to listen. The most effective teams in kind of self-organization and actually producing the best results were actually business, if they ask something for the team and the team comes with the answers or options, the business trusts what they say. It's actually, if they ask for a specific item, it could be strange numbers, it could be kind of interesting kind of solutions. But if you ask for the team to come up with a number and then suddenly say like you have to do it in half of the time, that's kind of going to kill any kind of self-organization or strive for a better kind of process.
So that actually moves us quite naturally to the next question. So how, and the one relates to DevBridge, but I think it's applicable to all of us. So how do you achieve the trust in people?
So I think it's multitude of things. It's not just a single thing. It's multiple of things because all of our sales cycle is also tailored that we enable our teams. As I said, we're working with a different kind of vendors. If we put our best agile team into the environment where it's kind of actually working in the waterfall way, there is no way they can achieve kind of any good results. So first thing, we are not working in the kind of in a waterfall way. We are not even taking those projects. Most of our projects are either not to exceed budget or time material based. So because we tried multiple of times, even fixed bids, it just doesn't work for us. We either fail to deliver what the client asks, or we actually overuse the budget, overshoot by a long shot. As most of the clients that we're working on, they have big projects that's pretty much unpredictable. You cannot size 2-year project. So this is one of the things. So initially, we don't try to put the teams in a position where they kind of where they will fail and we will not have a trust in there. Then it's a lot of things falls onto the PM side, and for the PM, it's not a project manager as we call them, but more like product manager. So they are responsible. It's a little bit tweaked version of project manager that we're using, and their responsibility is also to shield a team from unrealistic expectations. So our teams are directly, most of the time, they are directly related with the client, so they can communicate directly, and we are pretty open what we're doing, and we are pretty open in saying that some of the items are unachievable. At the same time, we have a pretty strict rules for running the agile ceremonies. And if the team is going for the planning phase, they have to commit to that part, and the client is usually included there. So it's not that that the team commits to specific goals and then PM goes and defines different kind of goals with the client. The team is directly confronted with the client. That kind of gives a better kind of trust in the team itself. So it's a multiple things that are involved, and of course the result is one of the items that we're looking for as well from the teams. But usually we don't have problems with delivering the results. So the team kind of automatically earns trust from the client as they're delivering the items, and we do have the processes to kind of to help the team out and shield them, or do not put in a strange positions where they can be kind of compromised.
Thank you.
Yeah, from my side, actually, I can share a quick experience from my side, is at least how I've built a trust with a team that is super close to me, is actually as a product owner, or maybe the same applies for Scrum Masters or Agile coaches, is that you, as maybe people that are perceived as leaders, that you also allow yourselves to be vulnerable, if you wish, that there is nobody out there who knows everything. So whenever we are facing some problems, if you as a leader are also able to admit that you have no idea, but let's try figure it out together, I think that really builds a lot of trust between the team and also maybe the leaders, because then you have more as if you are both in it together, so to speak. And I think from my experience, that has helped me to build a lot of trust with my teams, is that I'm very honest about situations, even those that are very uncomfortable. So that definitely helps.
Good points, makes sense. Ornella, anything from you, or should we move to the next one?
Well, from my side, I would only add that to build trust, you can only start from yourself. If you're not willing to trust others, the team will not be able to mature in the trusting team. So treat people with unconditional positive regard, and give trust before you expect others to trust you.
So it all comes back to yourself, kind of. Which leads me to the question I really wanted to ask from the question list. This one is kind of directed to Ornella, but I think everyone will probably be able to answer it because it's a universal question. It asks about sort of which situation, which company were you able to express yourself mostly, and what kind of leadership behaviors or skills made that happen. It's one of the might be a leading question towards where you currently work, which makes sense. But yeah, feel free to
express myself and my leadership potential, right? I'd say that to some extent I was able to express myself in all of the conditions, all the environments that I worked with. Yet not all of them empowers or enables me to move above or beyond what I think I currently can do. So in the current organization that I am happy to be part of, I feel extremely supported, extremely empowered, and I know that whatever awaits me and in terms of, you know, my leadership potential, I will be able to do it. So it's a little brag.
Well, it's a very good answer. I think just to add a bit on top of that question. So what kind of your managers, maybe leadership that helps with that? There was a question from Patras on the chat. So just wanted to ask.
Mm-hmm.
What leadership of your manager made this to happen?
Well, so if we look back into the triangle of self-organization, right, it's still a set of boundaries that kind of allows you to self-organize within. So if I'm self-organizing, I expect from my manager to act as an intermediate between maybe other self-organizing entities within the organization, or direct me to the goal or to the vision. And well, it's just a trigger to stimulate the self-organization, right? Because, you know, self-organization by its essence is emergence of some order and space of without order, where this, you know, space is impacted by some external triggers. So manager in this sense acts as a trigger, saying that, well, this is an objective, you know, and then I am able to self-organize towards achieving that. So I'm not sure if that's.
It makes perfect sense. A good answer. Should we move to one of the other two? Krista, maybe you want to share?
Specifically what? Sorry, I didn't catch the question.
So what enables you personally to be self-organizing and achieve goals? What kind of leadership behavior of your leaders, of your managers allows you to embrace being self-organizing and really shine in your environment?
Yeah, that's yeah. So basically, the very first thing for me to be able to be self-organized and to own things is if I like what I'm doing. And it's, again, sounds very super basic, but there would often be people who are filling some positions because the salary is good or whatever, and they are not there for the right reasons. So for me, the very first prerequisite is love what you do, and that will definitely help you to self-organize. And then when it comes to leaders, you need a leader that would kind of spot your potential, not block you from the opportunities that you are exposed to, and also allow you to maybe experiment a little bit, but also maybe give you, you know, a little bit more credit than you deserve, because I feel like we should always be given opportunities and tasks that are a little bit more than we can actually do, because that allows us to really test our limits, so to speak, and really test what we are capable of. So leaders that I've had always had trust in me that I can do things, and they always gave me tasks that I felt like, damn, I don't know if I can do it, but I'll try to figure it out. And that always brought only the best out of me and helped me accelerate. So those things definitely, at least from my experience.
Thanks for sharing. Rimantas?
Yeah, so I can probably just talk from different perspective, as I am pretty high at the leadership level. I can probably talk what gives probably the best capabilities for me kind of to do my work. So it's basically two things. It's understanding the context. It's like where you're operating and what are all of the inputs, kind of what are the deciding factors and just knowing the goal. So having the context and knowing the goal, you can always kind of come up with the best approach how to reach that goal. So if you are missing the context, that means you might totally make wrong decisions. So it kind of boils down to the teams as well. So if you just give them a goal and give no context, they might come up with kind of crazy ideas, which will be kind of, with your context, would be stupid. But giving them proper context and giving proper goal, they will kind of find a way how best to achieve those.
Makes sense. Good. I think we're kind of moving towards the end of our meetup. Also, time-wise, we're running out of whatever we have left. So I'll ask the last question to everyone, and it's probably related to today's environment. So, given that we are in this very difficult time of the virus impacting everyone's work, how are you able to, how do you embrace self-organization in this distributed working environment, and how has this been working for you and your teams in the last couple of months?
Yeah, I can start actually. And in my opinion, if you have a team that is passionate, that was self-organized before, that like what they do, that don't have leaders that block them, working remotely shouldn't affect anything, because that's exactly the power of self-organized team, that they feel the ownership and drive. And from my experience, we've been able to manage that in my teams that I work together with. So that's the thing, you need to be able to trust your people, and they could be at the other side of the world or in the room next doors. It doesn't matter. If you trust your people, if they love what they do, they will always self-organize, be it on Skype or physically. So definitely, I think for some teams, working remotely adds some challenges if it's some technicalities and things like that. But for me, luckily, nothing has changed, because self-organized teams, in its essence, they are self-organized, and working remotely doesn't stop them.
Thanks for your answer.
Yeah, I share a very similar experience, since I consider my teams to be very self-organized. Their ability to adapt to changed context was just, in thriving in those conditions. So we actually noticed significant improvements in the performance due to being distributed teams. So yeah, I mean, if you trust the people and your teams are self-organizing, this challenge of remote, even sudden challenge of remote, was pretty much, nothing.
Nothing changing then.
I would probably disagree with nothing changing. It's for our kind of company, it's pretty, we already been working a lot of kind of remotely with at least with our clients. But what we're seeing kind of, initially it was even better kind of result, because the people would be concentrated more and distracted less. So it's like less meetings, less personal communications. But I guess in the long run, it still erodes this team spirit, and the people need to get together. We are kind of social animals, and we have a certain budget, what we accumulated before this pandemic, and it keeps eroding a little bit. Less being shared, less context is being eroded as well during the time. So you need kind of to encourage the team to get together kind of informally, or or find the ways how they can actually just do this team building part, or do the coffee breaks, or whatever. So it does affect a little bit, as people do like face-to-face contact.
Makes sense. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for participating, for speaking and sharing your experiences and views on self-organization. So big thank you to all of you. I hope that people on the chat will also thank our speakers. And I've already seen some suggestions that it's time to go for a beer. I don't think we can do that this time, but for everyone, a recommendation, just grab a bottle at home. Thank you again for coming, and also sorry for any technical issues. We're all in this together, testing new ways of doing things. So we will be sharing this recording on our social media platforms. So also we'll share the slides on SlideShare, so you'll be able to grab and see what it all has been about. Any final words from any of you?
Stay home, stay safe.
Yeah, and
Stay
thanks
home,
a lot
stay safe.
for listening in on this sunny day.
Yeah, it was sunny here in Lithuania too. I see it's still sunny where you are. So again, thank you very much, everyone. We'll end the meeting now, and have a safe life at home while we're there. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.